Hello, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to begin in approximately 2 minutes. Hi everyone, we're going to give it just another minute just to give a few more people time to join, and then we'll get started. Thanks everybody for taking the time out of your day to join us. I'd like to introduce you to our team before we start. We have Liz Bober, who is the Library Assessment Officer and oversees library planning and budget in the Kelvin Smith Library at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio. We will be presenting strategic ways to leverage Scopus and SciVal to increase university rankings today. Doug Feldner is our Marketing Development Manager here at Elsevier, and he so graciously helped with all the logistics today. I'm Charity Elliford. I'm the Customer Consultant for the Research Intelligence Portfolio at Elsevier. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. We suggest viewing the presentation in full screen. That way you can see everything a little bit better. The session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive the link to the video afterwards. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to submit those questions using the Ask a Question feature on your screen. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll choose some questions to answer. I'll also be monitoring that, and I'll try to make comments as we go as well if we have that answer. For questions that we do not manage to answer today, we will respond via email in the next few weeks. So please include your name and with your questions so that we can contact you. So we're going to cover today a quick history of THE rankings and Elsevier. We're going to cover using Scopus and SciVal to make impact in university international rankings. We'll also provide you with additional resources for understanding Times Higher Education University rankings, and then we'll do a Q&A session. I'm going to hand it off to Doug.
Thanks, Charity. Yeah, it's hard to believe that it's been 5 years since we started our relationship with Times Higher Education. It's actually one of our most valued relationships. They chose our data, and they use Scopus, the largest A&I database in the world, as well as SciVal within their analysis. So it's the basis for initially for their university rankings. In 2018, we decided to continue the relationship, and we actually have it continued with them in writing till 2023, so they formally renewed through 2023. They've expanded their rankings in that time. They're doing specific Asia rankings, BRICS, world reputation rankings, young rankings, Japan-specific rankings. So they really dive into the data that Scopus provides. 1.5 billion cited references, 16 million author profiles, and over 70,000 institutional profiles in Scopus. So it's become the basis for them expanding what their rankings are. Interesting, and I'm going to ask the first poll question. Throughout this presentation, we'll ask some anonymous poll questions. And I'm going to mention the impact rankings. And I'm going to bring the first poll question up. And we'll start voting now, which is, do you know what the impact rankings are? Because it's fairly new for Times Higher Education. The impact rankings are focused on United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So they've based it on 17 Sustainable Development Goals, such as reducing poverty, equality, or reducing inequality, gender equality, climate affecting climate change. So it's something new for them where we're not looking at just a pure academic, but an academic within the social world. So keep your eyes on those. Those are really interesting. One other note, you'll notice that there are some links available over in your right pane. I do have the link for the impact rankings there, so feel free to take a look at them at your leisure. So we're taking a look. Good. The impact rankings are having some effect. I'm seeing 82% have heard about it. Oh, 75. So pretty good. A little bit higher than we would have expected. So just give you a little bit of context of where Elsevier is with Times Higher Education. We've got a strong relationship. We expect it to definitely be strong moving forward as well. And I'm going to hand it off to Liz so she can get to what you really want to hear, which is how does Scopus actually used as part of the THE rankings? So Liz, I'm going to send it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Doug and Charity. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this initiative that Case Western Reserve University has embarked upon over the past few years. The first question I'm actually going to ask, so I'm going to ask a question as well, is has your institution ever undertaken an exercise to clean up data in a database like Scopus or others? So I'm just gonna ask that question as I kind of introduce myself. Have you ever done anything like this before? Because that'll give me an idea of how in depth I really need to go as I speak. And as I talk about our ranking initiative, I really wanted to show the impact as I speak through this on QS and THE global ranks over the past few years, as well as show you all some practical ways to help your institution start this type of initiative. So first, I'm going to go into a little blurb and a snapshot of what Case Western Reserve University and Calvin Smith Library, or KSL, actually does. We're located in Cleveland, Ohio, and we are considered a medium-sized, high-impact research institution. We have over 5,000 undergraduate students, but what makes us unique is that we have a larger graduate professional population with over 6,000 students. Now, KSL primarily serves the undergraduate student populations, and that includes all of the College of Arts and Science programs, our management school, and our engineering school. Case Western offers 3 other libraries that help serve our law school, our medical, nursing, and dental schools, and our School of Social Work. KSL, being the largest of the libraries, in our last fiscal year had over 410,000 visitors, and that is a significant amount of people for us. And we also offer 2.4 million print items and over 800,000 electronic resources. Now, my position was initially created to assess and measure the collection, as well as the services and the impact the library has on the university. Now it has expanded to include the international rankings. So for over 3+ years, I have worked on making sure the university libraries also has a place with the university's international ranking initiative. Now, looking at this, as I start going into my process, it looks like from the vote, most have not started to undertake this type of exercise at 64%, which is great. So that means I can go into a little bit more detail as I go about this, just to give you more practical information to be able to help you start on your journey as well. Because when I started my own journey, there was no information for me to go to. As a librarian, I started with a literature review and realized there's really not much out there. So I had to look at all the methodologies. I had to go onto the websites. I used Wikipedia at one point just to try and give me an idea of what I needed to do. And when this project was assigned to me from my university librarian, he said, is there a way the library can impact our international rankings? There are sections about citations. And I said, I don't know, which is normally my answer to most things when I'm asked new and interesting things, and said, I don't even know what international rankings are. So I had to create a process that would be efficient and effective and move this project forward quickly. We wanted to move forward quickly. So today I'll talk a little bit about those steps in our processes and how we use Scopus and SciVal to achieve international impact. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about the two international ranking agencies that actually use Scopus and SciVal. And I'm going to quickly talk about QS, and then I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about THE, because that's kind of why we're here today. But both are very important to recognize because Scopus data is used for both. And as you clean up your data set, you'll be impacting both of those ranks as well. So you may know or may not know that Scopus data is being used by both ranking agencies. And when looking at these parameters, we need to understand that the data set of Scopus that are being extracted, we need to understand that they're pulling the actual data set out of Scopus. So they're pulling Scopus essentially. So they're pulling the whole kit and caboodle, and now we have to determine, well, what are they doing when they have it? There is not a ton of information. It's all proprietary. They're not just going to give away their methodology to us and say, here, recreate this. It's a good idea. So with this information that we have from the two agencies, we're able to start recreating some of what they're doing once we get the results. And you can use that by using the fact files that are released afterwards. They give you an idea of kind of what they used, what their parameters were, and you have a decent idea of where their number sits, so you can get an idea of where you need to go moving forward. So with the QS parameters, real quick, it's a total number of citations received by all papers produced by an institution across a 5-year period by the number of faculty members at that institution. They also take into account for the fact that different fields have different publishing cultures. So papers concerning life sciences are responsible for nearly half of all research citations as of 2015, and then are normalized. A 5-year publication window is for all papers. For 2020, they looked at papers published from 2013 to 2017. So their 2021 set would be 2014 to 2018. And then they also take a look into a 6-year citation window. So for 2020, it was 2013 to 2018. And so this year it'll be 2014 to 2019 for 2021, because QS publishes basically a year ahead. So now we have the 2021. And then I don't have the data for 2021, but QS for 2020 assessed 74 million citations from 13.5 million papers once self-citations were excluded. So that's important to recognize. We're not looking at self-citations with this information, which is important because a lot of faculty will self-cite themselves as they develop their procedures or their research, and those will eventually be excluded from the rankings. Now for THE, for 2018, they reviewed the bibliometric data for 67.9 million citations to the 14.1 million journal articles, article reviews, conference proceedings, books, and book chapters that were published over a 5-year period. It's important to recognize that these are the only items that THE will look at. So there's a lot of different things in there. There are editorials, there are different things that you need to recognize that will not be counted. So looking at the citations to these publications, they also looked at the 6-year rolling mark as being collected as well. So QS and THE have the basics of 6 years for the citation window, 5 years for the publication window. So those are 2 sets of numbers that you're going to have to consider as you go about delving into this information. So in the next few slides, there's going to be a slight lag because I do have some animation, so I don't want you to think that there's something wrong with your computer. It's just the way that the system is. And we're first going to look at Scopus.
Hey, Liz. Liz, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. For the people that are asking questions, could you please make sure to leave us your name as well when you ask the question so that we know who to respond to? Thank you very much. Sorry, Liz, go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's fine. It's a perfect spot to stop me. So here you are. This is what you're going to see if you're going into an affiliation hierarchy. And I'm going to go into way more information in a second. But first, I wanted to show this because you need to determine what your affiliation hierarchy will look like. So that is the first question as you enter this sort of process. You need to determine if you have professional schools, institutes, affiliations with university hospitals that all need to be accounted for and agreed upon by your stakeholders. So for example, Case Western Reserve University, we have a law school, we have a medical school, we have a dental school, we have a school of social work. We also have major affiliations with the Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals. So we also have to account for them and figure out where they sit in our hierarchy. How are we going to be considered? What do we want our faculty publishing as and under? Do we want them to be publishing under Case School of Medicine, or do we want them to be consistent and publish under Case Western Reserve University? So speaking with the fellow stakeholders of this project, you need to make that consideration first and foremost. But how do you know what affiliations go under your hierarchy? Well, first thing that you're going to do when you start creating your hierarchy in Scopus is to look at the Institutional Profile Wizard, or the IPW. You need to determine how many institutional variations you have and want to work with others to learn about those different variations. You will learn more variations exist than you would ever think. I started with the other libraries on campus. Being a librarian, I wanted to start with my colleagues to try and learn what variations they knew, and you would quickly realize that all of your professional schools will call their respective schools and institutes and labs something completely different, okay? So when you're looking at this information, I started with a list of about 200 variations, and I was thinking, wow, that's a lot. I now have over 700 affiliations, and that list grows quarterly because I do clean up quarterly now. We also went through a school merger back in the 1960s, so that created even more variations than I anticipated. And you may ask, why do I care about variations from the 1960s? But when I considered this project, I didn't consider it just for international rankings. I also considered it as, this is how we improve the whole picture of the institution to ensure that we are showing Case Western Reserve University as a full encompassing institution, to where people can look at us, you know, on a website, or as they're going through and trying to determine if they're going to collaborate with us, they're able to see all of the work that we've done. We've completely included everything that we've ever done. So I started going back, and I started looking at this information. We were established initially in the 1800s, 1896, I believe, so 4 years off. But I really wanted to make sure that all of the work that was being done was definitely accounted for, and it gave that complete picture of our research landscape. I also started to learn about the unknowns. The unknowns is the game changer. So for example, we work with Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals here in Cleveland. So we have cross listings, and it's really important to honor the organizations separately, but ensure that the correct affiliations are aligned. I recommend keeping access to the IPW at the beginning very small, allow only maybe a few key holders essentially to have access to this, so that you aren't running into people adding and removing affiliations until your hierarchy is absolutely complete. Okay, so my first step when going into the IPW, I was able to go through and determine which affiliations and different versions and variations of the institution name were there in Scopus quickly by looking into the individual publications and include them in our hierarchy. This takes time and a strong attention to detail. We're also able to learn about unknown issues. So, for example, you will catch incorrect spellings. Case Western Reserve, anyone? I don't think that's what we're actually called, but that's how it appears in a publication, so we need to account for that. We also have to account for wrong addresses. You would be surprised how many faculty members and researchers use their personal home addresses when they publish. So this is why you see a Case School of Engineering in San Diego. I can tell you we do not have an engineering school in San Diego, but that is something that you have to take into account for. So these new variations of the institution, you're going to realize that you were not aware of any of these, and the IPW will help clean up the institution affiliations. Now, this took me about a year and a half until I could say I was in a place where I just needed to do quarterly cleanup. So it takes time, and you have to have the dedication or the team of people to really help you clean this information up. That's really your first step when you're actually in the process of cleaning up. Now, here comes the really complicated step. Cleaning up faculty variations. Faculty affiliation is very complicated, and this example I'm going to show you is an extreme example that I hope no one ever has to go about hearing or seeing in their own institution. This one faculty member has hundreds of publications listed in Scopus. However, this faculty member is associated with multiple institutions. So he has a lot of labs, he works with other institutions to develop things. So to clean this up, we pulled all of their publications out of the system, determined how they were actually associated for that paper using their CV. So we went one by one, line by line. We needed to determine if CWRU was the affiliation or if it was one of his other associated institutions. So when we went paper by paper, we were able to determine how they actually were affiliated. We then submitted all of this information to Scopus to help clean up the issues that we were seeing. And last summer, this faculty member was moved multiple times from school to school as they were claiming the author. So for example, the author is affiliated with all the institutions. So what those institutions were doing is they were just moving all of our Case Western Reserve publications under their institution. So that inflated their numbers on the Outlook. Granted, those papers internally through the actual database were still Case Western. However, it was looking like the faculty member was actually fully associated as their primary affiliation with those institutions. That is not the case. So we had to work with the faculty member to assign their ORCID ID to the Scopus profile because that linked him to Case Western as his primary employer. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. This stopped the multiple claiming that occurred. And that summer, it since it took so long, it took a long time, and it was very frustrating, to say the least, because we had to keep trying to wrap our brains around what was actually the issue and how we could actually fix this. Now, this is just one faculty member. We have cleaned up a few thousand current faculty members, and we also have to account for the faculty members that have left over the past few years, since those papers will still count at least on an international ranking basis. So we need to ensure that those affiliations are still accurate and reflecting Case Western as well. We also want to make sure that faculty members that are coming to Case Western, say they're a brand new faculty member and they have not published for Case Western, we want to ensure that we're not including them or accidentally claiming them as taking credit, as we might say, by absorbing those papers under our institution, at least on the Outlook. So on the back end, in Scopus, it'll still reflect where that institution paper is coming from, but for us, it would look like, you know, we have this faculty member when in case that's not the case yet. And we want to be very conservative about this. So we try really hard to ensure that we are not overdoing it and just randomly pulling people together and making one profile. So if a faculty member is prolific, such as this gentleman, we want to ensure that everything is accounted for and everything looks the way that we need it to look. One thing that we noticed with one of the newer releases of Scopus, I believe this came out in October, is that we can now review all the known institutions for the faculty member and how they've published. So it's really helpful to give us an idea of where they're cross-listed, where their dates may end or start depending on their publications, before we reassign publications or adjust their affiliations in Scopus. Now that we've made significant improvements on the back end for Scopus, we're able to start using SciVal to better analyze the institution and the affiliations, as well as the faculty and departments. So there are many ways to create a university hierarchy. And we have been making multiple versions of departments and of the schools depending on the requests and the needs of the institution. Each November, we receive the board-appointed faculty members from our institutional research office and create a basic hierarchy for the institution, and it's set up by school and then drilled into the different departments. We will then make adjustments from there as the requests come in from department heads, librarians, and other areas on campus that request special projects or analyses. We completed a project where the College of Arts and Science Administration, the College of the Deans over there, they were looking for an in-depth hierarchy for their school so that they could review the rank of faculty members and their scholarly output. I requested their most current list of faculty outside of the institutional research board-appointed faculty members to ensure that I had everybody that could be considered a College of Arts and Science faculty member. So these were mainly the adjuncts, the non-tenured professors, and the instructors. Using the import feature, we were able to clean up the profiles during this process. So you'll get a screen, you import all the information in, you'll be able to see all of your faculty members, and you'll be able to kind of see where they fall. Now, one thing I want to make note of during this process is that sometimes your faculty members will fall outside of your green or yellow. They're going to fall into the red, where they are just not pulling up. Now, this might be the case where it's a brand new faculty member and they never published before. They're brand new to the field. The other option, the other alternative to that is that they've never published anything under Case Western before, so they're going to fall off your list as well. And if that's the case, I keep a different tallied list. The reason for that is because that will impact however they're doing their analyses, because these faculty members are falling off their list. So this type of project, you want to ensure that you're creating a list that are not being added, so the impact of those results are accounted for. You want to make sure that you are giving all the information back on these special projects. The newest update in SciVal for importing researchers includes the ability to save and go back into the module. I have to tell you that this is a game changer for me, because I would be in the middle of importing an entire hierarchy for a college and then get asked and be pulled away. And then you lose all that work because you have to close out of something and then you're not able to finish it. Now you're able to save and continue later, which I have to tell you, as a data nerd, I was super thrilled by this. And now if you need to take a break from the process or need to switch gears, you finally are able to save and then go back and import your researchers and continue. So kudos to Scopus and SciVal and Elsevier for taking care of that, because it drove me nuts for quite some time. Now moving right along, we have taken care of all the back-end data. We are in a spot where we have our hierarchies built, we're able to give that information out to administrators, and we're able to say, here's your data, this is the best we can do with the information that we have. Now what do we do? The next step is communication. That is absolutely critical to be able to focus on the present and the future, because once your data is clean, there's no real place to go other than trying to ensure that everyone is working the way that they need to be working. So the library partnered with Research Administration to talk directly with the research deans of the university to offer formal training sessions that focus on how to use Scopus and SciVal, as well as promote the implementation of ORCID IDs. We have completed multiple one-on-one sessions, as well as targeting schools and individual departments. To get the buy-in from the faculty, the library offers consultations where we will sit with a faculty member to set up their ORCID accounts and review their different profiles on Scopus and other similar services. We work across the schools and with other libraries on campus so that we make the most impact and encourage the most participation. I would like to say that we have 100% faculty with ORCID IDs, but really we're only at about 30% of fleshed out ORCID profiles. So for example, you want your faculty member to have a profile like this and not like this. Okay, so when you look at these two different profiles and trying to tie it back to Scopus so it creates a continuous link, you want to ensure that your faculty members have their also known as. So I previously was under Burnell as my maiden name, and now I am Bober, so I want to ensure that anything I published under my old name still gets captured and brought over to me. I also want to make sure that I have my employment listed as well as the dates. The reason for that is because the employment winds up getting tied to Scopus, and that creates that loop. It also does that for the other databases that you're able to connect to through ORCID. So having at minimum the employment section for a faculty member is absolutely critical. So what I recommend when the librarians go out, or if I go out, we have instructions for them, and basically it's, we want your name. We also want your known as. So if you're going by nickname, going by a completely different name, we have that. We have your employment history. We want to make sure that at minimum it has your current employer. And then we also have them tie back to all of the databases that they've published under. So we can tie it to Scopus and we can tie it to others as well. So those are critical, and it takes at most 5 minutes. The longest time it takes is because NIH, as well as other funding organizations and publishers, they now require an ORCID ID. So what will happen is that they just create this basic no public information available profile because they just need the number. They don't recognize that they need the additional information to be able to flesh that out and create a more accurate profile. So they will have an ORCID ID, they just don't remember their login information, and you have to sit there and wait for the login information to come through their email and get a reset. And you just sit there and you just explain to them, you know, this is what happens. You've created one. I had one faculty member with 4 ORCID profiles because he kept using different emails in his creation. And that was a bit of a headache because we had to get those rolled in together. And once we had a fully fleshed out profile for him, we were able to tie everything back to his account, and we were able to give him a nice complete picture. One thing that you are going to come up against when you're talking to faculty members is, I don't have time for this. What's the point of this? These are actual questions that you will get. Sometimes they're worded as bluntly as that, or sometimes they're a little bit nicer. And really you need to explain to them that it's not just for the university to show our research landscape and our profile. It is also for you as the faculty member, you as the researcher, to be able to say, this is my complete picture. This is all the work that I've done. Because I can tell you right now that as you're being looked upon, say you're looking for a new position, people are able to go into Scopus, or people are able to go into another database, and they're able to see that you have 6 publications, 2 publications, because you're using a different name, and they're not connecting to each other. And the reason they're not connecting to each other is because the algorithm on the back end of Scopus, if it's not 100% sure or 99% sure that you are the same person, it's going to split it apart. So if you are Jim Jones, and you also go by Jimmy Jones, and you go by James Jones, and you publish under all 3 of those names, and you have nothing to tie it back to, all of those they'll be recognized as 3 different individuals by Scopus, and you have to manually go back and clean that up. With an ORCID profile, it's one thing. All of those knowns, all of that information will fall under your ORCID profile, and that is the reason why we push ORCID as we are training these faculty members on the beauty of Scopus and SciVal, to really show all the work that they are personally doing, all the work they can be doing, the collaborations out there for them. So we've really taking this international rankings spot and moving it along into, here's your research, here's everything that you've been doing. We've expanded it, we've made it a broader show for them, essentially. So we do a lot of grassroots work when it comes to this. A lot of it comes out of word of mouth. There's no magic solution for any of this, and you just really have to work to create a good working relationship with your faculty and researchers. Now the most important thing, the actual results. We've talked a lot, I've said a lot of things, and now you're wondering, does this actually work? It actually works. By doing this cleanup, by making yourself or your team and really working through this information, you are able to see, I know the lines are going down, but that means that our rank is going up. So what I want to show you is that QS, we've improved by 46 spots as of 2020. Well, yesterday, the new QS 2021 report came out, and we moved up another few spots. We're at now 162 in our overall international rank change. So we've actually significantly moved up again. And a lot of that has to do with the improvements of our data set. When you look at the overall scores, when you break down those methodologies out of that fact file. THE, we have moved significantly as well, 39 spots we've moved up. 2021 has not come out for THE yet. We're hoping to see the same improvements there. And even if we don't, we know we have done our due diligence as for the data set. And these are the numbers that just can blow your mind when you see this, of how much work we've actually done. So THE scoring overall rank. There's an overall rank that you get, and it's out of 100 points. And then it gets broken down into teaching, research, citations, industry income, and international outlook. Now, I'm focused on citations because I would like to say I am the one and only reason why our ranks went up. That would be amazing. I would love that. It is not the case at all. I am one small part of a very large team of administrators, of other departments that work to ensure that our faculty numbers are accurate, that our industry numbers are accurate, our international outlook, which is extraordinarily important for international ranks, is accurate, and to ensure that we are all cleaning up our data, we're all reporting correct data, and we're making movement in every way we can. Now, we started at a 90 in about 2017, and since we've actively started to clean up, we now sit at a 95 out of 100 for our citations, and that is because of data cleanup, by cleaning up your data set. You would be surprised what you wind up needing to do once you actually get into it, but you have to be dedicated to doing the actual work to get there. Now, I've talked about the two that have been focused on Scopus data sets, but I want to show our progress as of 5/28, so as of right around Memorial Day, of where we all sit with all of the major international ranks that are out there. ARWU is also known as Shanghai. And then you also have NTU and Leiden, which are smaller but important ranks in specific subject matter. And then you have US News Global Rankings. So the ones in red are actually supported by data sets by another vendor, and they have a less flexible way of cleaning up your data sets. You have to work a little bit harder to get that information cleaned up. It's not as a smooth transition as, say, you would find with Scopus. So I wanted to show this because even though the numbers are lower and they're not going up necessarily, there are a lot of different reasons why. It's not because the work isn't there, the other vendor's data set is poor. You also have to understand that the methodologies for all of these are different, and you need to account for that. So for example, Leiden, we went from 143 to 57 between 2017 and 2018 with our cleanup, but then dropped to 60. Well, why did that happen? It's because they added 35 new institutions to their rank and to their ranking methodology, and so that bumped us down a little bit because the number increased. So it's harder to maintain that number. However, in 2020, when those numbers roll out, hopefully we'll be able to see a little bit more. But it's important to show both sides of the coin, at least in my opinion, because I am all about transparency when it comes to this, but also to have the context as to why things are the way that they are. So that's it for me. I thank you for listening to me ramble. I can talk about these things for hours at a time because this has been my world, but I really appreciate you listening, and we welcome any questions. But first, I believe I'm handing this back to Doug.
Oh, thank you, Liz. Had to get off mute. We have some additional resources, and Liz, thank you so much. You know, in the current economy and challenges I know universities are facing, the rankings are important, and it was interesting to see their rankings within some of the other ranking bodies. I read an article recently on BBC where they value international students at about $45 billion for U.S. universities, realizing that we have audience from around the world on this call, but it's really important. The rankings do help in terms of attracting that as a source of students for your organization. So thank you so much. It was such an interesting overview on how you went through the process, Liz. We have some additional resources available for you as well. I mentioned the links before. There's two additional links that you'll notice in the pane to the right of the presentation. The first is a book that our Elsevier marketing team has put together on THE and QS rankings. It's an e-book that explains, and it's a takeaway you can keep with you as well. That has just been updated to include all new information we've received from both organizations. So feel free to click on that link and download. We're also going to be having some podcasts upcoming. They're not scheduled yet, but we're working with personnel from both QS and THE. So you'll hear it from the organizations themselves. The last link within that pane will bring you to our 2030 podcast page. And again, that's a research podcast that we put out regularly. So keep looking at that space. We'll reach out to you afterwards with a follow-up email including these links as well. But just some additional resources and hopefully some additional information also on rankings coming up. So that concludes the formal slide part of our presentation. So I think now Charity is going to hop in and look at some of your questions, and they are some amazing questions from what I've seen in my pane. So Charity, it's all yours.
Okay. So we had two questions about rankings. So the first question is, can you explain the relation between bibliometric analysis and academic reputation, and how bibliometric analysis is realistic when measuring as an indicator such as something like community service? So with that, it's important to understand on the THE, they share their details of its methodology at www.timeshighereducation.com, and then you can see there that Times Higher Education uses a combination of both quantitative and qualitative inputs. So Scopus and SciVal data are part of that quantitative input that the THE uses for their ranking indicators. So things like the reputation survey administered by THE is an example of the qualitative input. So the bibliometric piece only plays a part of it. It's not the whole answer, it's just part of the answer. The other question that we had in regards to rankings was, how are multiple affiliations treated? For example, if an author cites 2 affiliations in a paper, how are the citations for that paper attributed? I have to be honest with you, I can't find the answer right now. Liz, have you run up against that?
Yes, that's a great question. There's a few. So the methodology for the ranking agencies, we can and will prioritize where you fall, where the author falls in the overall lineup of researchers for the paper. When it comes to how we take a look at that on our end for data cleanup, we ensure that the faculty member primary affiliation is listed first. So, for example, if their primary affiliation is Case Western Reserve University, but they work with an institute out of a different institution, we want to ensure that both of us are getting credit for it by ensuring that both are listed under the individual affiliations. Now, we don't go through and clean up other schools' affiliations, so if it's incorrect on their end, it's their responsibility. But for us, we ensure that we do not take credit for what they've done.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, how can one detect proprietary journals? And then what are the procedures for publishing in Scopus? Doug, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of that goes, it's actually before it gets into Scopus. So Scopus is fully curated. So we do have a panel of Scopus editors. Once a year, they actually go through the journal list with a major intent of adding new journals that are not predatory, as well as trying to locate journals that are. So we actively monitor the content, and again, it's not our journals. It is a full ANI database of what journals get put in there. So that is a vetting system that we have to keep predatory journals out of the database. If you're interested, my email is up there. I can send you some links with a lot more in depth on how they work, but it is something that we are very diligent about.
Okay, thanks. The next question is, how is ORCID tied in Scopus? So the way that works is it happens in Scopus. So what you would do is you would look up an author details page. So you're going to do a basic search for an author. You're going to get to the page where it's going to have their name at the top. And then over on the right hand of the screen, it'll say Connect ORCID. And that's how you would connect. And then it takes you through a little wizard where you're going to do that. So it doesn't happen in ORCID, it happens within Scopus. The next question is it normally the library that cleans the data at a university? Liz, you want to take that?
Yes and no. You'll find it, I find more research administration offices handle a lot of this. However, the library, we personally wanted to be the holders of this because we understand the importance of doing the complete picture versus just cleaning things up to clean them up. So we're the ones who are doing it at our institution because that's the way we felt it was going to be the best way to move forward. However, I've seen a lot of institutions doing it throughout of the research administration office or institutional research. I guess that kind of depends on where your resources are.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, can you please provide the link for the ebook that was referenced? Doug, do you want to explain where that is, the attachments and links within the Bright Talk? Doug, are you on mute?
Yes, still on mute. Sorry about that. Where the tab is for questions, there should be a tab also, and it's a little hard for us. We see a slightly different screen than you that says attachments and links. And the third link down, if you click on it, it will bring you right to the PDF for the THE and QS ebook. If you're still having a problem, my email's up there. I will gladly send it out to you if you want to reach out to me.
Okay. How can an individual department do the data cleanup and edit its profile to improve its own rankings? Liz, do you want to?
Sure. So if you have access to Scopus, there's a couple things you can do. If you have Scopus and SciVal, you can build your hierarchy out in SciVal for the department and then clean up your faculty members through that way. That's probably going to be the easiest way to do it versus going into each individual faculty member, because if you're in SciVal, you're then able to see that group of researchers, your department, once you have it, and be able to compare it to other peer institutions or look at what your overall productivity is for the past 5 years. So that's how I would go about doing it. To clean up my individual department, it's going to be the quickest and easiest way to do it. And then if you need to clean up affiliations, like through the IPW, you need to determine who has access to that. Say, for example, you know that your engineering school is called something, you don't see it popping up under your hierarchy for the affiliation when you're looking at your university's page in Scopus. You would then, I would suggest reaching out to whoever manages the account and determine who has access to it, and then kind of work through there to determine how you're going to do that.
Okay, the next question we have is, will an institutional license be required to do this, or can one department at a university be able to get in for these needs? That's kind of a mixed question, because yes, you do need an institutional license for Scopus and SciVal to use all of the features. However, our IPW, we do something called the spreadsheet method, in which we help universities clean up their data without them necessarily having a license. However, it is a little bit limited. You obviously have a lot more functionality if you have Scopus. So that's kind of like a maybe. But yes, for all the functionality, you do need a license. It's not just the department; it's the university. The next question that we have is, how is the affiliation cap counted for QS rankings? Liz, do you know?
Yeah, you're going to have to go on to the QS website to determine that information, and if it's not there, you can contact them and they should be able to provide you more information. I honestly don't know the exact answer to that, unfortunately, but QS is fairly open to giving as much information as possible without giving their methodology away to people that ask questions like this.
Okay, good. The next question we have is, someone had asked if we have tutorials on how exactly to set up and import a hierarchy template for a department. That would be in SciVal, and yes, we do. I'm sorry you didn't leave your name, so I don't know how. We'd be happy to work one-on-one with you as well to do that. If you could just send another question through the chat and give us your name. But there is a video in SciVal, so when you go to scival.com, you go all the way down to the left on that home screen. There is some videos there, and one is for creating a hierarchy. So we'd be happy to work with you one-on-one as well. I just need you to respond back with a name. And that is our last question that we have right now. There is nothing else. Doug, do you have anything else?
No, you'll get a follow-up email immediately with the recording. Share it so that we'll keep the recorded version of this webinar up pretty much indefinitely in Bright Talk. And we'll also send another email a little more personalized, and we'll have a bunch of the links and some additional information for you. So thank you. We do appreciate you coming and spending an almost hour with us to learn about THE rankings and Scopus. And very large thank you to Liz Bober. We've seen her give this presentation before. It is so chock full of information, and to see someone who's actually done this live, we hope you found as much knowledge in it as we did.
Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.